Hello, I'm Robert, fact-checking the stories that scare you, and this is a perennial one. False prophets are always telling you the world is about to end because we've had lots of earthquakes today. What they don't explain is that you always have lots of earthquakes every day. This shows all the ones of magnitude 4.5 and larger for the last month. But they often go down much lower than that, 4s, 3s even. And then once you get that low, at 4 you get one every hour or two. And then if you go down to 3s, you've got many more than that. Let's look at the list here. If you go to a 3, then it doesn't even say how many there are, several an hour. I don't think bother to write down how many there are. And this shows all the earthquakes for the last month, last 30 days. And as you can see, they're along the margins. They nearly all happen along the margins of the continental plates. Earthquakes are how the continents move around. And since the continents have been moving for billions of years, we have had earthquakes for billions of years. They are totally natural. You can't stop them. The most you could do is to, if maybe in the future we find some way of modifying earthquakes which we can't at present, then maybe we could learn to turn big ones into lots of small ones. But any time you have a small one, it's releasing some of the pressure that would go into a big one. So it's reducing the size of the upcoming big one. It's much better to have lots of small ones than to have no earthquakes at all and suddenly a big one. It depends on the plates, and some of them move past more easily than others, and some of them are quite sticky, and then they stick for a while, and then you get a big one, and everything moves, and then they stick for a while, and they get a big one. Other ones, they just go little bit, little bit. And, well, the world just wouldn't work as it does now if it weren't for the continents moving around. And all the ecosystems and different continents in different places. At the moment, the Himalayas are because of India crashing into Europe. And it created the Himalayas, which are currently rising because the continental plate of India has just bashed into Europe, into Asia, Eurasia, that entire region. This little plate here is bashing in like that. So that's an example. Here, all these quakes in the middle of the Atlantic are because the Atlantic is spreading apart. So new material is being created here, and the moving apart by centimeters a year, and that's why the Atlantic is getting a little bit wider, and you can see that little bit there used to fit in there. And geographers usually kind of wonder, why does that bit of South America look like that bit of Africa? It turns out it used to be in there. That fits into that gap. And then gradually, over billions of years, they came apart. And this is partly why we've got so many. We've actually got much more diversity in wildlife at present because of all the continents. And because we've got continents at the poles. We've got a continent at the southern pole, we've got an enclosed ice sheet at the northern pole. Most of the time, our world doesn't have a continent or an enclosed ice sheet, sea ice, at either pole. So at the moment we have a cycle of ice ages been going on for several million years. That is because of the current pattern of the continents. In the past, then go back to the time of the dinosaurs, and all the land was in one little area, and it's much less biodiverse. We have a very biodiverse planet because of the huge range of ecosystems, and because we have these continents separated out. Usually, quite often, everything is from one big island, basically. Now we have lots of different continents with different species in Australia, in South America, North America. Africa is even different from China and Indonesia and the United Kingdom because of different continents, and Northern Europe and Siberia. We have a much more diverse world. And so when people talk about how we're getting these, they say the start of a mass extinction, it's actually starting from a very biodiverse world, which is losing some of its species, partly because we're transferring species from one continent to another, which is more or less simulating what happens when continents go together. So in the future, it will all be one big landmass, and it will be much less biodiverse, because there'll be much more communication between different habitats. And so we're never going to have a mass extinction in the sense of the dinosaurs, nothing like, even with human extinction. In fact, most of the ecosystems are becoming more biodiverse as a result of the way humans are moving stuff around. But overall, the world as a whole is getting fewer species. Anyway, that's a bit of a digression, but the whole point is that continents, the earthquakes are how the continents move around. The continents have been moving around for billions of years, and the way our world works is based on that. And the volcanoes produce the carbon dioxide, which we need to maintain life on the planet. If it weren't for the moving continents and volcanoes and the earthquakes, this is constantly exposing new material, other materials being subducted. This forms a cycle where the plants, shells and different kinds of plankton and things, they fall to the bottom of the sea. They some of them form things like limestone, which then get subducted underneath the continents, and then comes up as the continents rub against each other and heat each other. Then the carbonates get turned back into carbon dioxide, which comes up into the atmosphere, which completes the cycle, which then gives us the carbon dioxide we need in order to make plants and have sea life and so on. If it weren't for the continents, we would have a much, much less interesting planet. It would have much less carbon dioxide without the carbon dioxide, although it's just a trace amount in the atmosphere, and yet you would have much less by way of life. The amount of carbon dioxide does vary depending on the distribution of the continents and things. And if we had, but not in the short term, not on the scale of human lifetimes or even civilizations, even over millions of years, it's pretty steady. And indeed the oxygen also, because we're in such a dynamic world, it so happens that our oxygen is automatically regulated by a kind of system by which, if there's too much oxygen, then the vegetation changes and it gets absorbed more. And if there is too little oxygen, then you get more vegetation and you get more oxygen, and you get. I've got an article about this. I can't remember all the details, but you get more if you get the reactive rocks and what happens to them, and how I will have to do a separate video because I can't remember the details and how the oxygen is used. But we have an automatic kind of thermostat, as it were, which keeps the oxygen in the atmosphere at the right amount for us to breathe, which is based again on this continental drift and exposing rocks. And again, it's just the way our world works. It's such a habitable world for us, and part of it is the continents, and it just is a side effect of all that we get earthquakes. And if we didn't have earthquakes, then even worse, then everything would get stuck, and the continents, because look at, for instance, at Yellowstone, then it is a hot spot that is moving over a magma plume from deep below the surface, and so it is soon going to stop it has slowed down. It is now doing every 900,000 years is the prediction for this current cycle. If it does erupt again, then it's likely to be 900,000 years recent thing. It's not a sure thing, but it's a rough idea in a recent article in Scientific American, because it is clearly slowing down. And but it may have stopped altogether, and it's certainly not going to erupt this century, and not likely for 1,000 years. It's just in the wrong state to erupt at present, and it would require centuries of warning to actually all the things that would happen. At least that's what most geologists think, that it's just can't change. It's the top magma chamber has got too little magma, and the bottom one has enough, but it can't push it all up in less than a century. It just doesn't seem feasible. So it could be that it's done its last super eruption. That's true of all the supervolcanoes worldwide. Now, if the continents weren't constantly moving like this, so the reason that Yellowstone is coming to the end is because the Americas are moving westward over it, so the hotspot is moving east beneath the park. So it is removing, its heat is eventually it's going to be moved too far away from where Yellowstone is now, and the magma plume will just solidify. It will probably come up in a great big mass of lava spread out over the surface, not a super eruption, just all the lava eventually making itself to the surface and spreading out. That'll be the end of it in that location. The hotspot has moved on, it's no longer heating it up. And then millions of years after that, it'll start another Yellowstone. Now, if this was like Mars, then on Mars, continental drift stopped 4 billion years ago, 5 billion years, 4 billion years ago, not 5, sorry. You can look at the Valles Marineris, which is just a feeble start. It's like the Great Rift Valley in North America, but it has only just started. It opened up, but it then stopped. And it didn't split up into a separate continent. There was no continental movement on Mars. Then you go and look at Olympus Mons, and this is what you get if you have no continental drift. So we look at Olympus Mons. So we would have something like this. Olympus Mons, giant mountain in space. Let's see if I can see a good image of it. There we are. And this gives you a good idea. Now the vertical scale here is hugely exaggerated. It's not really like that at all, but this will give you an idea. So they've increased the vertical scale maybe 10 times, 20 times, I don't know. It's not as big as that. It's actually a very, very shallow volcano, and if you were on the ground you wouldn't even know you were going up a mountain. But Olympus Mons it's got one hot spot beneath it. It's a bit like Yellowstone, but the continent is not moving, so the volcano just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's been getting bigger for billions of years. That is what would happen on Earth if we didn't have continents. Now, but Earth is much bigger than Mars, much more dynamic, so if we didn't have the continental drift, Earth would actually end up like Venus. So one hypothesis for Venus, and so again, if I go and look at images, and well, maybe you know about Venus. There we are. This gives the idea. So that's the actual surface of Venus, and it's surrounded by. It's got long channels where. See these? I'm not sure if those are the channels. If it's high enough resolution, maybe it's. I think they're a little bit smaller than that. Those are little volcano things, sort of. And none actually known to be erupting at present. Then long channels, which I don't think you can see at that resolution, which are the longest lava flows in the solar system. And not actually, I think they might be solidified, I'm not sure, yeah, I think they are. But for Venus may well have been like Earth, but it didn't have continental drift, or some people think that continental drift stopped working on Venus a few 100 million years ago. And then when the continents just stopped drifting, it's a little bit smaller than Earth, close to the Sun, a little bit different in various ways. One theory about Venus is that it was a perfectly normal planet like Earth, with not a very thick atmosphere, a thin atmosphere like Earth, very habitable. It may well have had life on it a few 100 million years ago, just like Earth. It may have had seas and rivers. This is one of the leading theories about Venus nowadays. It's not an obscure idea, it's a mainstream idea. And we may even find meteorites from early Venus on the Moon at the lunar poles. We might find early life from Venus on the lunar poles, where it would be caught in the poles in freezing conditions, so-called temperatures of liquid nitrogen, that we might well find organics from early Venus on the lunar poles. That's one idea. The scientists seriously think that we should search for meteorites from Venus at the lunar poles, from early Venus. Anyway, so it was like, but Venus then is an object lesson as what would happen if the earthquake stopped. If the earthquake stopped, what some scientists indeed, I'm not sure if it's the majority, but lots of people think it's a mainstream view. I think it might be the most favoured view at present as to how Venus got the way it is. So the earthquakes basically stopped, the continents stopped moving, and then the likes of the Olympus Mons or Yellowstone, they just built up and up and up, and eventually got to the point where the entire subsurface of Venus was molten. So people think of Earth as being like that. It's not true. We just have little blobs of magma beneath the volcanoes, and then way down deep, the core over 2,000, I can't remember if it's under or over, but 2,000 kilometers deep, then you get a molten layer, and then you get the solid metal core. But with Venus, once the continents stop moving, this reduces the amount of heat that can come out, because moving continents also helps to, it's the part of the motion. The continents are driven by heat coming out of the center of Earth. Once the continents all stop and jam, then you get less of that heat coming out. Then you get these huge super plumes and of molten magma covering large areas of the surface. They think that in case of Venus, there might have eventually been a single super plume that covered the entire surface of Venus underneath the crust. And then, all in one go, in a few million years, the crust overturned. The ocean's completely gone. All the carbonates that had been deposited at the ocean floors would turn into carbon dioxide. We've got masses of carbonates in our seas, and if they all turn into carbon dioxide, we'd have a huge, thick atmosphere. Because, as I said, it does cycle around, and it circles back through the volcanoes, but only a little bit at a time, dribble at a time. And we have huge deposits. Most of the carbon dioxide is in the form of carbonates at any given time on the ocean floor, and rocks on continents as well, limestone rocks and things like that. You have the coal and the fossil fuels, that's quite a lot of it, but by far the majority is limestone, chalk and carbonates of various sorts. Massive amounts of carbon dioxide is locked up in that sense, in that form. Indeed, if you put acid onto limestone, then it'll dissolve away and it'll produce carbon dioxide. And if you heat it up enough, it'll turn into carbon dioxide. So they think that it's possible that Venus was just like Earth, but with massive deposits of carbon of limestone and things like that, limestone and chalk. It may have had chalk just like on Earth. It might have been an Earth-like planet with microbes and maybe even multicellular life. And just like us, it might even have had trees and animals and plants, and who knows. I mean, it had plenty of time to evolve. If it was only 300, 400 million years ago, or whatever time they say it was, it could easily have evolved. Well, It probably could, if it had, we don't know if the timeline was the same, but it could easily develop multicellular life. And if it was a little bit accelerated, it could have had Venusian dinosaurs or Venusian trilobites. We just don't know. Anyway, so the earthquake stopped on Venus, the continents got stuck, a huge super plume formed because the heat was no longer able to get out because the earthquakes had stopped. And then the whole thing turned over in a few million years. The magma pouring out into the oceans boiled the oceans away, turned all the limestone and chalk, if it had it, into carbon dioxide. If there was any life left after all that, then it may have gone up into the clouds, where at very high in the atmosphere, then there's moisture there, and the temperature is just right for human beings up in the cloud tops of Venus. On the surface, it's absolutely impossible to live on Venus now. You get boiling acid, and far higher than acid boiling, acid rain, and you get crushed and acidified and burnt and turned to a cinder, and you just wouldn't survive even seconds on the surface of Venus now. It's ridiculously hot, like an oven. And it's very difficult to design probes to last on the Venus surface. And any life on those probes would be instantly sterilized. So it is actually possible that humans could end up living on the Venus surface in the mountains, if you were to get very radical engineering proposal to dig great caves in the mountains. It turns out rock has huge thermal inertia, and if you could, with mega technology, cool down a big chamber beneath a mountain, then it could stay cool, and then you could have humans in it with active cooling, just living there. But I mean, it's very eccentric. Who would want to live like that? But there's a way you could live on Venus in the clouds, which you can see if you click on one of these. Then it turns out that just above the cloud tops, just going in and out of the cloud tops, the temperature and the pressure is exactly the same as on Earth. And it's the only thing that's a problem for living there is that you've got acid in the clouds. So it's one of the easiest places for humans to live. You've got protection from you outside of Earth. So of course, Earth is far better than anywhere, but Venus is in some ways more habitable than Mars, because you wouldn't need spacesuits. All you need are suits to protect you against acid, which is much, much lower tech than suits. And then you can have like an aqualung, because the pressure is the same inside and out. A full closed system one, because of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and the sulfur dioxide in the acid, but no pressure suit needed, just a bit like a diver's thing, but it's to protect you against basically an overall, but a full suit and acid protection. And then you could have people living in airships in the clouds above Venus. And some enthusiasts for Venus colonization would think that we might end up having colonies in the Venus clouds. So it's possible, if there was life in the ancient Venus oceans, there may now be life still in the cloud tops, because there is life very high up in the clouds on Earth. You get microbes that kind of manage to survive up there, and seem also to have a bit of a thing going, even though they come down and down over days, but over hours and days. So they don't live there permanently. But on Venus, then microbes on Venus could stay in the clouds permanently, because they've got big updrafts, and if they could manage to evolve to exploit those updrafts and sort of and maybe have various ways of just sort of staying up in the clouds, and they stay up naturally because the atmosphere is so very, very thick, very dense beneath the cloud tops, and it would take ages and ages to fall down into the parts where they'd frizzle up. So it's one possibility that's seriously considered by astrobiologists, that Venus might have microbial life in the clouds. So, I mean, it is possible that some of that life still survives from early Venus, but it's not a place you want to go. It's no use for multicellular life, and so we can be very thankful that our planet has earthquakes, because that's where we would end up. There's no doubt about it. If we didn't have earthquakes, or some way, see, we have to have some way for the continents to move about, or else we won't have oxygen, we won't have carbon dioxide. We'll have problems regulating the oxygen, keep going up and down in wild swings. We won't have the carbon dioxide, so you won't have life anyway. And so without life, you don't have oxygen anyway. And then, so we'd die multiply if we didn't have the earthquakes. And then you have that the heat can't get out of the center of the Earth so quickly, because the moving continents help to, because the continents move because of the heat from below, which creates these big updrafts of heat that sort of move things around. The reason the Atlantic is spreading like that is because of heat from below kind of pushing up, and so that's also helping to disperse heat from the interior of our planet. And if that somehow could stop, which is not, it can't stop in our case, then so if the earthquake stopped, then we'd be Venus. So the earthquakes are an unfortunate part of what makes the Earth habitable, and we just have to learn to live with them. We can't stop them. What we could do, conceivably, in the future, is to make them so the big severe earthquakes somehow jiggle them so that you just get lots of small ones, but I've never seen any practical suggestion for us to do that at present. It's just way, way beyond controlling earthquakes. So controlling volcanoes, we have theoretical ideas of ways to do that. We could stop a super eruption by putting about a dozen different ways you could stop a super eruption with centuries of warning, which we would have. Then you can pile up, you can make big swimming pools, and just the weight of the swimming pool, because super eruption means you've got a huge, huge amount of magma, and it's moving up because it's lighter than the ground above it, and the ground is not holding it down enough, and eventually it erupts. You can certainly slow it down by piling loads and loads of earth on top of it, and water. You can make swimming pools and huge, huge things, lakes really, and put lakes on top, artificial lakes on top of your super volcano. Then you'll be able to stop it rising. And then another way you can do it is that you can connect from beneath the super volcano. Drill not into the top, that's obviously risky, but drill into it from the side and extract power from the super volcano and use it to power your civilization. And by extracting power in that way, then you cool down the magma, and so you could automatically solidify this rising magma plume. So you could probably do both, pile stuff on top of it, slow it down, so instead of being a couple of centuries, it's 1,000 years, and then have a thing from below to extract the power from it, to solidify it. It doesn't go into the magma, it goes into the rocks around the magma, which then cause more of the magma to turn into rock. You drill a little bit further, it cools down further, you drill a bit further. And so this is something that, not us, we're not quite there. We could do it, but it's not, we don't have any super volcanoes that are due to erupt. And in case of Yellowstone, then it is a national monument thing, and it's not permitted to extract energy from the Yellowstone, because that would stop all the geysers, which are need to be preserved. Very interesting. And so nobody's going to be extracting power from Yellowstone anytime soon. But if, say, 300 years from now, 1,000 years from now, it's not likely to be sooner than that. It's probably not. They think it's unlikely to happen before 1,000 years. And most likely, you're talking about, say, 300,000 years from now. Because if it was going to happen again, it's most likely 900,000 years after the last time, which takes you to 300,000 years into the future. But big civilization, 300,000 years in the future, then it's got a super volcano, Yellowstone or somewhere else, and it might well do this, and pile stuff on top of it to slow it down, and then and extract power from it to solidify it. And then we could stop. So we can stop volcanoes. We can tame volcanoes. It's not being done at all, except you could call the geothermal. We certainly use the power geothermally in Iceland, but not to a significant enough amount to solidify any volcanoes. But in principle we can. If we extracted loads and loads of geothermal power from a volcano, we would gradually, from the ground and land around a volcano, we would cool it down enough so that the rock would solidify, and that would change the eruption of it. So we can modify volcanoes. We can't. In principle we can, although we're not doing it. And we can predict volcanoes to some extent. We can't modify earthquakes in any way that anyone knows of at present. I haven't even seen proposals for doing that. And we can't predict them either. When people in Mexico, when you get an earthquake warning in Mexico, what's happened is that there are various kinds of waves that come out from the epicenter of an earthquake, and some of them travel much faster than other ones. And by the way, it is because of earthquakes also, another benefit of earthquakes, they help us see inside the earth. The only reason we know what the interior of Earth looks like, and all these details I told you about it being solid, then liquid, then solid, and all that. And we can even know the shape of the interior magma chambers for Yellowstone and so on. Most of this information is coming from earthquakes, using the waves of energy, the kind of shaking of the ground that you get from earthquakes, and the 3-4 different ways that the ground shakes from any earthquake, and they move through the earth in different ways. So some go like that, some go like that, some go like that. All sorts of different ways it changes, and then there's more complex ones that do funny things that are quite hard to describe. And then we look, and so we have an earthquake goes off here, and then we go and say here somewhere, and then we go and detect it here with our detectors, and we see how it's travelled through the earth, and that's how we see what's going on inside the earth. So that's another benefit of these volcanoes, of these earthquakes. They're kind of natural ultrasound that let us see through the earth. Ultrasound in terms of the size of the earth, although it's actually infrasound compared to our hearing. And so some of these waves go much faster than others, and that's how you get this very fast detection. You get the very fast waves, which you hardly feel, and then you get this warning saying, go and get out of the house, go and hold on to something, do your emergency protection, because you've got 3 minutes and an earthquake is about to hit you. And that's how they do earthquake warnings. And then to a certain extent, maybe by having instruments actually at the epicenter as well. So you can warn only a few minutes. You do get pre-shock, precursor, I can't remember what they're called, but these little shakes that come before the big one. The problem is that most small shakes are not followed by big ones, and many big ones don't have small ones before them. So when you get a small quake, you have no way of knowing if it's going to produce a big one. And really, you don't know what the interval is until the big one. So although it does happen, it is unfortunately totally useless for predicting anything. It's no better than random. So we just can't predict earthquakes. So when you get these people saying, oh, there's going to be an earthquake on a particular day, then, well, look at this. These are all the earthquakes for the last 30 days. They're bound to, if you look at especially if they say a big area, like ones with lots of earthquakes, Malaysia, Japan, China, Mexico, if they take one of these areas and they say, oh, there's going to be an earthquake on such and such a day, you can pretty much guarantee there will be. Or they can say there's going to be a big one in such and such a week. You can be pretty sure there will be a big one. So that's how it works. And so I'm just going to show you, these are all the recent earthquakes. So I was just watching, Paul Begley was talking about listing all the earthquakes that have been in the last day. Look, I mean, it does look quite impressive. All those on the 25th. Look how many earthquakes there are on the 25th. But now, go down and look how many there are on the 24th, and on the 23rd, and on the 22nd, on the 21st, on the 20th. Look how many there were on the 20th, 19th, 18th, 17th. Some days have many more than others because you tend to get swarms of small earthquakes, especially magnitude 4 or less. And this is from magnitude 4.5 upwards. If I did it from magnitude 4, which he did, then it's going to be many more. Occasional magnitude 5. It's going on and on and on. That's the last month. There's vast numbers of earthquakes every month. But this is a typical month. There's nothing unusual about this month. And so, if you predict there's going to be an earthquake on the 2nd of June, you can be sure there will be. What's more, there might well be a magnitude 5, which is a somewhat larger one. Be a good chance. Another magnitude 5. That's on the 31st. Another 5. There's a 5.5 on the 30th. So you get quite a lot of magnitude in there, 5.6 and a 5.1, both on the 30th. And occasionally you get a 6 if you keep going back. You find the occasional 6. I don't know if there's been any. So now if I go and look at my thing, then you get a 6. Yeah, 6 happen 2 or 3 times a week, so I probably scrolled past them rather too quickly. There's so many. There we are, 6.8. It shows the 6 is in red. There we are. No, 5.5 is red. There, 6.4. Maybe it's showing reds above 5.5. There we are, some more reds. So 5.5, 5.8. Yeah, I think it's doing reds above 5.5. There we are, 6.6. So you get quite a lot of those as well. And you get these people saying, oh, it's a huge earthquake, it's a 6.6. Remember, you get a 6.6 2 or 3 times a week. You get a 7 or 7.9 1 or 2 times a month. And you get an 8 or 8.9 to 8.9 1 or 2 times a year. The only really unusual ones are magnitude 9. There have only been 5 of those ever recorded. One of those would be the tsunami in Japan. It was a deep magnitude 9 off the coast of Japan, and that caused that huge tsunami. So those happen from time to time, and remember, even if you get a big magnitude 9, then that is just the plates getting a bit stuck, and then they move suddenly, or move up and down. If it's a tsunami, then a tsunami happens because I didn't show you my hands. If it's a tsunami, then tsunami happens because they move down like that, suddenly, a couple of meters. If you're going sideways, you won't get a tsunami. So you will never get a tsunami from the San Andreas fault, because that goes sideways. The mega tsunami in San Andreas is just an imagination of the filmmakers. It wouldn't happen in real life because it moves sideways, and the fault is mainly on land. But if you go below the sea floor, and if it's a big jump of a couple of meters upwards, then you get a large area of rock, a couple of 100 kilometers across maybe, moving up 2 meters. That creates a huge wave, just a single wave that spreads for maybe 100 kilometers. And that is why a mega tsunami is so devastating, because it's not a very tall wave, only a meter or so, only a few centimeters in the deep ocean. And when it gets to the nearest land, and because it's so big, if it's significantly wider than the depth of the ocean, then it moves without dissipating hardly. And so that's why tsunamis don't get smaller as they go out. If you've got a meteorite that hits the Earth, it's 50 meters across, 100 meters across even, hits in the middle of an ocean, it's just going to splash, and the splash won't hardly spread out at all, because the splash is much smaller than the depth of the ocean. So it's just going to splash and then it's gone, and if you are 10 miles away or something, you'll hardly notice. But if you have a tsunami, or an absolutely enormous asteroid which is just not feasible, but if you have a tsunami, and if you had a 300 meter asteroid, which is exceptionally unlikely, then that can cause a tsunami. And that sort of a size, 100 meters and upwards. More like 300 meters if you really want one, a kind of fairly biggish one. And but that's why tsunamis come from earthquakes, but only particular earthquakes that go upwards. And then, because it's such a big wave, even though it's very small in the ocean, when it gets to land, then, as you see, first of all you get the dip, and the sea goes out, and out, and out, and out. And people who don't know what it means may run up and curious to look at the sea. That's obviously the worst possible thing to do. So if they're sensible, they go the opposite direction and get onto the nearest high land. And then you get the thing coming in, and you've got all of this 100 kilometers width of wave coming in, and then it piles up and it gets higher, and then it just keeps coming in and in and in, because you've got 100 kilometers of it behind it, and that's why tsunamis are so devastating. And so a magnitude 9 caused the Japanese tsunami, and there was a magnitude 9 there's a big magnitude 9 in the Canada region. That was the biggest one ever in recent times. But it's so sparsely populated it didn't do very much. So what the effect of it killed a few people, but nothing like it would if it was a major city, a really big city. And so it's very significant, but it wasn't like if it had happened in San Francisco or something like that. So it's a combination of how big the earthquake is and where it is. Magnitude 10 is impossible. So you sometimes get people predicting a magnitude 10. There isn't any fault line. The size of the earthquake depends on how long it sticks for before it moves, and on the length of the fault. And so if you've got a really long fault and it sticks for a long time, you can get a magnitude 9 when it suddenly moves. If you don't get many of the little ones, you can't get a magnitude 10 because there's no fault line on Earth that is big enough for that. So people sometimes worry, oh, the Earth could crack apart or something like that, or that California could fall into the sea. This is impossible. There just isn't any fault line anywhere on Earth that is long enough to create the size of an earthquake that could do something like that could cause California to fall into the sea. It just can't happen. And remember what I said, in any way it's moving sideways, so it's not moving up and down anyway. So this whole idea that California would move downwards is just not geologically sound. It can't do that. It's just moving sideways. It's never going to happen. That whole California will fall into the sea is impossible. It's geologically nonsense. So anyway, this turned out to be quite long, but I hope this now helps you to understand we do need earthquakes. They are part of how our Earth works. We can't currently control them in any way. All we can do is predict them. If you are in an earthquake area, then do learn how to protect yourself against earthquakes. So, and this is that little thing about you've got 170,000. There we are, that's my number. I want how many 3s and 4s. So if you go down to 3s, there's 60,000 of those every year. So that's lots every day. And if you got down to 2.5, 170,000. So if I divide 170,000 by 365, then that is an average of 400 of those. And then let's divide, so that's side 60, no, side 24. Let's say how many there are of those every hour in the world as a whole. because they sometimes go down all the way down to magnitude 2. And there are 19 of those every hour. So they are happening every 3 minutes somewhere around the world. So if you're going all the way down to magnitude 2, you've got no shortage of earthquakes to have false prophecies about. So yes, so I was just going to say, do check the protection against earthquakes. So I'll put all these things in the video description. So how do you protect against earthquakes? Well, in Mexico, if you are in an earthquake area, you should have instructions for your region. So do go and check your instructions, and if there are any drills, then do the drills. But the main message is, if you know where to go, you've got a predetermined meeting points, and you've got a drill, and you've already worked out in advance that this is what you do when you have an earthquake, go there. But don't just dither around and say, oh, should we go in, should we go out? Because it will have hit you before you've decided what to do. You need to have done a drill before and know exactly what you're going to do, and then just do it. And if you don't have something like that already decided, if you're just surprised by an earthquake, then the thing to do is to drop, cover and hold on. And try and avoid, be a bit wary of things falling off shelves onto you. And so that's the drop, cover, seek cover under a desk or beside an interior wall, hold on for stability, drop to your knees. And that's the safest thing to do if you get an earthquake, and that saves many lives. And then you can do lots to prepare for an earthquake. For instance, making sure your house is tied to the foundations. If you're in California, it costs a couple of $1,000. But if you have a big earthquake, it could make all the difference. And have an earthquake emergency kit to hand, because it could be a while before services resume if you've had a big earthquake. And it may be a while before it is safe for the rescuers to come to you. So it's a good idea, if you're in an earthquake area, to have some food, some water, because there won't be any water in the taps, so you can drink. So you can last out a day or two until the rescuers get to you, if it's a difficult job getting to you for one reason or another. And so that's it. So there we go. And well, I know those of you who watch Paul Begley, this is based on Paul Begley was telling everyone the world is going to end because we've got lots of earthquakes, and he's basically just using the latest earthquakes. This is a story you can run a dozen times a year. Just choose any day of the year and then go and look at all the earthquakes, and then shout out, oh seriously, the world's going to end because we've had a magnitude 4 in Timbuktu or something. It's very silly stuff. And I don't know why people don't see through him. He just is constantly telling you to go and buy this, buy that. He's very commercial. He definitely will get it. He was telling, in this one he was saying, for the price of a coffee you can go and get a virtual private server which will let you be anonymous on the internet. You don't need that. And he's trying to get everyone to buy all these things, and you have to pay regular supplements. And he says, go and tell them that Pastor Begley sent you here, and here's your URL that his followers will be typing down and putting into their browser, and then going to this place. Then he will, of course, get a kickback from all the people that have bought these useless VPSs. I mean, they do have value if you have a reason for them, mainly for web hosting. They're a very good way if you get to the point where you need to be a server for lots of people, for lots, it goes a bit beyond your normal internet service. And these can be useful for that. And they can be useful for anonymizing, but You don't need that. You're anonymous anyway. The HTTPS, nobody can tell who you are from your IP address, which is just your entire area. All that any website can tell is that there was a visitor from, in my case, from somewhere they would think I came from Glasgow, because that's the nearest, that's where my IP address is from, because of my internet server. So you don't need to be anonymous. Nobody can find you from just your IP address. It's a very specialist situation where you need one, or if you want to circumvent the licensing of, say, if you wanted to try and access US movies from the UK, or the other way round, and by pretending you're in a different region. So it's illegal, I think, probably, to do that. So there isn't really any sensible reason to use a VPS. So anyway, that again is a digression. Anyway, but yeah, I might as well do a long one. Yeah, these false prophets do these huge long videos. So why not do a long video of truth, of telling you the true things, of telling you about geology, and not a false prophecy at all, just telling you how the earth works. If you've got the patience to watch, I just looked at 1 hour, 46 minutes. I certainly haven't watched all of it. Someone told me they were scared, and I looked at the little bit. I just listened to the little bit where he talked about earthquakes at the beginning. And please, I strongly recommend stop listening to these false prophets. They are like an indoctrination, self-indoctrination, self-propaganda. They are changing the way you think. Just in just in the way that, for instance, if you watch lots and lots, if you watch back to back, if you watch 1 hour and 46 minutes of Coca-Cola ads, you might well feel very thirsty and want to go and buy Coca-Cola at the end. It's much like that. It will affect your thinking. And watching to someone saying over and over again that the world is about to end because of this earthquake, because of this cloud, because I didn't tie my shoelaces this morning, it means the world is going to end tomorrow. If you keep hearing this message over and over again, that's just a joke, he didn't seriously say that. Then, for anyone who tends to take these things literally, but just listening to someone telling you for 1 hour and 46 minutes, frequently, all the way through, that the world is about to end, then this affects the way you think. It's like propaganda. It's the drip, 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 drip. Someone constantly saying something changes how you think. So the number one thing to do, if you are getting scared of these false prophets, is to stop listening to them. Now, I know that's difficult to do if you got caught up in it. So, but just start thinking, when I listen to Paul Begley, do I come away from that more frightened or less frightened? Is it good for my state of mind? I feel the urge to go and listen to him again, but is that urge a sensible one? Is it helping you? And then you will find yourself being pulled back, because there's something about the way he does it that hooks into the minds of certain people. And so from time to time, if you try to stop, you'll find yourself back there listening to him, and you didn't even realize that you decided to do it. So when that happens, then notice what it does to your mind. Are you feeling reassured and happier, and are you in a better place in your life? And what else in your life could you have done during that hour and that nearly 2 hours that you've been listening to him? What else could you have done? Are there some friends you could have been talking to? Is there something you could have made, something you could have done? Could you have gone swimming, or a bit of a run, a bit of a jog? Could you have watched a movie, or whatever it is that you like? Read something. Could you have been out in your garden planting something? And whatever it is that you like doing. And then, so it's not just that you've got frightened by going online. It means, and I do hear from people who spend hours every day either watching these videos or searching online obsessively. Those hours are taken out of your life. There are things that you could have done, some things that were much more positive, that could have helped you. They may even help you get a better job in the future, or help you to come across people that are congenial and that that are beneficial in your life. And all sorts of missing opportunities that you're losing by spending so much time searching online and listening to these people. There's a positive side to doing something different. So instead of thinking, oh, I've got to stop listening, think about the other stuff that you're not doing, and all your opportunities or different things that could have happened in your life as a result of just living a more normal life and not spending hours every day searching and listening to false prophets. Then that may help to motivate you gradually. Don't be too hard on yourself. Don't be hard on yourself at all. And if you are really stuck in this sort of thing, then this kind of fixation that you just can't stop searching, can't stop looking, then there is therapeutic help for that. Find a well-trained psychotherapist, a well-trained psychologist who knows how to help you deal with these situations where your mind gets stuck in a rut and you just can't seem to get out of it. It is well treatable. There are many techniques they can use to help you get out of these ruts. So if it's become really serious, as it has for some of the people I help, then certainly if you get a good psychologist and you click with them, then they can definitely help you to deal with this. There are also some drugs that help with some people, because if you have got involved in this obsessive listening to false prophets or obsessive searching for earthquake news by people who pretend to be able to predict them, or whatever it is that you've got involved in, just going and searching every day, is the world going to end? Some phrase like that. If you go and search in Google, is the world going to end? You are not going to turn up anyone, hardly, who says no, the world is not going to end. Not because nobody thinks that, but because it's only a question for people who think the world is going to end. They're the only people who write anything. Other people, it's not a normal thing to think that the world is going to end in the near future. And scientifically, billions of years, hundreds of millions of years, then it's going to be much more difficult to live here than the ways we can continue to live after that. If you've got a scientific background, and then you might come across people talking about asteroids. They tend to be space colonists who are trying to motivate you. They've got an axe to grind. There's a reason why they're trying to make the world seem scary, because they want to motivate people to go into space. Not that it makes any sense. So as I explained, Venus is by far the most, in my view, Venus is Mars. The Moon is the closest and easiest in some ways. Then you have Venus. Then I would say Titan, then Callisto. In terms of habitability, if you ignore all the questions of how do you get there, then you get Venus, and you get near-Earth objects. Venus, it's a little bit more difficult to get there, and then you've got floating in the clouds, and a lot of people kind of just don't take it seriously at all. So I think it depends a little bit on how you see these things. It's one of these bars and faces things where some people see all the downsides of living in the Venus clouds and some people see all the upsides. But when it comes to Mars, then it's not a nice place to live at all. It's very, very difficult to live on Mars. I would say much worse than living in the clouds above a hot volcanic surface, a hot roasted surface, where at least you're safe up in the clouds. And but Mars, it's instant death if you haven't got a spacesuit, and you need a very high-tech spacesuit. If you don't have that, then you can't breathe oxygen. You can't get enough oxygen, even the oxygen in your lungs. You can't use it because the pressure isn't enough. You will only have the oxygen left in your blood, which will keep you conscious for a few seconds, and then you're unconscious, and soon after that you're dead. If you're on the surface of Mars without a full pressure spacesuit. A lot of people don't realise that. You might as well be on the Moon. It's not really much difference. It's the same on the Moon, but the Moon is much closer to Earth, and if you need a medical evacuation from the moon because you had some problem with your spacesuit and you did lose pressure, but they managed to get you into your hab in time, and they recovered you, and you were just a little bit damaged, then, and you needed medvac back to Earth, then you can get back in 2 days from the moon. It takes 6 months from Mars at the fastest, and most often it'll be more like 2 years. So you can see that Mars is not a good place to be, at least in the present, and lots of other problems with Mars. And it's actually, in many ways, the moon is the best place. So, well, that's another thing to think about. But the Earth is by far, 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 far better than any of those places. That is where we live. As Carl Sagan said, the Earth is where we make our stand. And it's our pale blue dot. And for long as we've got a secure, safe base on the Earth, and we are looking after it properly, and we're doing so many things, we're moving so fast. It's just incredible what's happened in the last five years as to how we're coming together and being much more responsible for the Earth, and both in terms of the biosphere and biodiversity, and also in terms of global warming. And people tend to look at all the things we're not doing. They don't look at all the things we are doing. They focus on Brazil because Brazil is cutting down its rainforest. They don't even look at that even in Brazil it used to be much worse than it is now. If you go back a few decades, even the worst that Bolsonaro is doing is nothing like what it used to be. And then they don't look at the other continents where, like in Africa, there's much less. There's an awful lot of reforesting going on in China, and in Asia, and in North America, and in Europe. Then there's a big increase in forest, not a decrease. So there's so much good going on in the world, and I think the future is very positive. And because I'm not just seeing things as they are now, you see, I've seen how they've changed in the last 5 years, and projecting forward, how are we going to change the next 5 years, next 5 years after that, and that's 2 more changes like we've done for the last 5 years before we get to 2030. And we have until 2050, which is another 4 changes after that, to get to zero emissions on the 1.5 degree path. That's sort of 4 times, doing 4 times what we've done for the last 5 years. And I think we're going to, I would be very surprised if we are not well below 2 degrees C when we finally stabilise the climate. Certainly well below 3 C, that's just about certain. I would expect well below 2. That's my own guess. Anyway, I'd better stop. Well, I don't have to if I wanted. If I wanted to equal Paul Begley, I've got another 3/4 of an hour to go, but I'm not going to do that. I'll stop at this point. So do like and subscribe, as usual thing. If you want to do more of this, see more of these, and you're welcome to join our Doomsday Debunk group on Facebook, either if you're scared, if you're good at reassuring scared people and helping them, or fact-checking in any way. So that's it. I'll upload this, and so because I know quite a few people, it's a perennial. There was someone particular who was scared of earthquakes. I did this for, but it's perennial, and we gets told so often, and so hopefully this gives you an awful lot more background. It fills in. When I'm talking, I say many more things sometimes, so I don't explain all that in here. But I will add this video to that article, and then then that will help. Whether I will ever write this up, I don't know. It's quite a lot to write up, but it's hopefully an interesting video. So here we go. I'll stop this now, and then I'll upload it.